2013 start on Thursday in Belarus, and many believe Moscow is testing its ability to wage war with the West. NATO says the exercises, codenamed Zapad or West, are much bigger than Russia has declared, involving some 100,000 troops and firing nuclear-capable ballistic missiles. Moscow says only 13,000 will take part. The last large-scale exercises in 2013 employed special forces training, longer-range missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles. A year later, those tactics were used to annex Crimea. Reuters NATO correspondent Robin Emmett.
NATO is very nervous about these Zapad exercises, mainly because of what happened in Crimea in 2014, and then Russia's direct support for separatists in eastern Ukraine, and then the scope and swiftness of Russia's ability to move into Syria. All these things caught NATO off guard. NATO was wrong-footed, and Russia, NATO says, just hasn't been clear about what it's actually doing in these exercises.
NATO says it is calm and vigilant as it watches from the Baltics, but it thinks Zapad may be a simulated conflict with the US-led alliance, showing Russia's power to mobilize mass troops at short notice.
And NATO is trying to show that, if you like, it's the grown-up in this, so it won't be doing a great deal. It'll be watching, staying calm. It will have a few of its own small exercises, but NATO says these are annual exercises and they're unrelated. There are some uncomfortable questions for NATO. Should NATO be doing something like this in the future? Clearly, Russia's ability to mass huge numbers of troops at very short notice is a clear military advantage.
I don't think in Zapad...
The US Army chief in Europe has said Zapad could be a Trojan horse, used to make incursions into Poland and Russian-speaking Baltic regions. The Kremlin accuses NATO of building up forces on its frontiers as in the Cold War days. This US equipment arriving in Poland this week to shore up the alliance. But Russia says the West has nothing to fear from Zapad.
You're watching Reuters TV. Here are your top stories.
An unlikely vote for Trump's fire and fury.
There is no collusion.
An interview with Mueller, Trump says not likely.
A Japanese astronaut apologizes for telling tall tales.
This is Reuters Now.
Now North Korea's reckless pursuit.
A surprising approval for Donald Trump's hard line on North Korea from the South. President Moon Jae-in said Wednesday Trump's fire and fury threats for Kim Jong-un might have done its job.
I think President Trump deserves big credit for bringing the inter-Korean talks.
It comes after the two Koreas held talks on Tuesday for the first time in more than 2 years, where the North agreed to hold military talks with the South and send a large delegation to the Winter Olympics next month. After initial skepticism of the talks from Washington, as Reuters' Christine Kim explains, Moon's shout-out to Trump sends a strong message.
Outside observers have said Moon's comments should be seen as a smart strategic move. It's pretty much the best move he can play in this situation. Analysts say South Korea is standing firm in showing North Korea the alliance between the United States and South Korea is strong, that South Korea probably won't be too relenting in giving Pyongyang what it wants this time around, while it maintains a strong relationship with the United States.
The North, for its part, made it clear in talks its weapons program isn't up for discussion, but the South shouldn't worry. Its missiles are only pointed at the U.S.
Bottom line, they all say there's no collusion, and there is no collusion.
President Trump on Wednesday would not commit to being interviewed by Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating whether his campaign colluded with Russia during the 2016 election.
Would you be open to it? We'll see what happens. I mean, certainly I'll see what happens. But when they have no collusion and nobody's found any collusion at any level, it seems unlikely that you'd even have an interview.
Reuters legal correspondent Jan Wolf.
President Trump's indications that he might not cooperate and give an interview could just be political bluster, because really he doesn't have much leverage here. The leverage is with Bob Mueller. The U.S. Supreme Court said in a famous case involving Richard Nixon that the president must comply with a subpoena to testify. So Mueller has that in his pocket. If Trump refuses to testify, Mueller issues a subpoena, and Trump really can't do anything about that.
Earlier on Wednesday, Trump blasted the various investigations into the allegations of collusion.
I'll speak to attorneys.
According to news reports, Trump's lawyers are discussing how they might respond to an interview request from Mueller, but have not received one yet.
The witch hunt continues.
These volunteers are preparing to scale the Italian mountains in search of African migrants. An estimated 800 have attempted the perilous route from Italy to France over the Alps mountain range since August last year, heading towards France. Many had previously made the dangerous Mediterranean Sea crossing from Libya, having travelled through the heat of the desert. And they are ill-prepared for the 6-mile journey on a mountain path that reaches a height of 1,762 metres. That's over 5,700 feet. Often walking through the snow in little more footwear than gym shoes. And that's why rescue volunteers are coming across scenes like this. A migrant lying freezing in the snow.
It has happened to us, to rescue groups in deep snow, under heavy snowfall, who were stuck and could not move forward. In one case, a migrant had lost both shoes in deep snow, and his feet had started to freeze.
In recent weeks, heavy snowfall has made the route even more dangerous. And most of those who successfully cross the unmarked border are caught by French police anyway. In a train station in the Italian border town of Bardonecchia, this migrant is telling a translator that he had to turn back because the journey was too grueling. French gendarmes are also here to prevent unwanted passengers from boarding trains to France, leaving migrants to stare as they depart, or plan their next attempt to brave the mountains.
Protests, clashes with police and more than 230 arrests in Tunisia on Wednesday, the third day of anti-austerity rage in towns and cities across the country. Anger has been building since the January the 1st budget. The cash-strapped government raised prices, including petrol, and increased taxes on cars and phone and internet use, unfairly targeting the poor and middle class, critics say. Tunisia was the democratic success story of the 2011 Arab Spring, but since then it has had 9 governments, none able to heal the country's growing economic problems. The Interior Ministry said those arrested had attacked police stations and government buildings. On the southern island of Jerba, petrol bombs were hurled at a school belonging to an ancient Jewish community. There were no protests in Jerba, so locals said the assailants had exploited the fact that the police were deployed elsewhere.
13,000 people are stranded in this alpine ski resort in Switzerland after heavy snowfall blocked roads and rails and caused a power outage. A plow hitting one of those railways seen here. The lights are back on now in Zermatt, and the local tourism office says there isn't any immediate danger, but cautioned they could still lose power again. Authorities had to airlift some people out. Avalanche warnings in this area are at their highest level, and local media say a mudslide hit a village in the region at the same time. There were no casualties. Zermatt is in the shadow.
In the Italian border town of Bardonecchia, this migrant is telling a translator that he had to turn back because the journey was too grueling. French gendarmes are also here to prevent unwanted passengers from boarding trains to France, leaving migrants to stare as they depart, or plan their next attempt to brave the mountains.
Protests, clashes with police and more than 230 arrests in Tunisia on Wednesday, the third day of anti-austerity rage in towns and cities across the country. Anger has been building since the January the 1st budget. The cash-strapped government raised prices, including petrol, and increased taxes on cars and phone and internet use, unfairly targeting the poor and middle class, critics say. Tunisia was the democratic success story of the 2011 Arab Spring, but since then it has had 9 governments, none able to heal the country's growing economic problems. The Interior Ministry said those arrested had attacked police stations and government buildings.
On the southern island of Jerba, petrol bombs were hurled at a school belonging to an ancient Jewish community. There were no protests in Jerba, so locals said the assailants had exploited the fact that the police were deployed elsewhere.
13,000 people are stranded in this alpine ski resort in Switzerland after heavy snowfall blocked roads and rails and caused a power outage. A plow hitting one of those railways seen here. The lights are back on now in Zermatt, and the local tourism office says there isn't any immediate danger, but cautioned they could still lose power again. Authorities had to airlift some people out. Avalanche warnings in this area are at their highest level, and local media say a mudslide hit a village in the region at the same time. There were no casualties. Zermatt is in the shadow of Switzerland's famous Matterhorn.
U.S. immigration agents cracked down Wednesday on 7/11. Nearly 100 stores in 17 states were hit by raids, with agents arresting 21 people suspected of being in the country illegally. According to an Immigration and Customs Enforcement spokeswoman, it's the largest such worksite enforcement by ICE since Donald Trump took office last January. Reuters correspondent Bernie Woodhull.
ICE said that in 2013, there were 9 7-Eleven owners and managers arrested for various crimes, including harboring illegal employees and setting them up with false documents. So ICE agents who have said that they're going to intensify this effort and broaden it to other companies, they said that they are following up on these arrests that they made 4 years ago.
ICE is now giving 7-Eleven owners a tight deadline to prove other employees are authorized to work. In a statement, the agency's deputy director, Thomas Homan, said, quote, "Today's actions send a strong message to U.S. businesses that hire and employ an illegal workforce. ICE will enforce the law, and if you are found to be breaking the law, you will be held accountable."
We need the wall for stopping the drugs.
This follows Trump's promise to crack down on illegal immigration, including calling for a wall at the border with Mexico and ending protection for Dreamers and other refugees with temporary status.
The search continues Wednesday for victims of the devastating Southern California mudslide, which slammed into homes, covered highways, and swept away vehicles in the Santa Barbara area, killing at least 15 people.
I think most people are really shocked at the extent of the damage and how big the impact was to the area.
Rescue efforts now focusing on the upscale community of Montecito. It's unknown how many remain trapped, with cell service, gas, electricity, and water services all down. The area is also home to many celebrities, including Oprah Winfrey, who posted this video to social media of her walking through her backyard.
So there used to be a fence right here. That's my neighbor's house, devastated.
Ellen DeGeneres shared a photo of brown sludge dotted by buildings, writing, quote, "This is not a river, this is the 101 freeway in my neighborhood right now." And former Dallas Cowboys quarterback Troy Aikman added another of a scene blanketed by mud. Helicopters have airlifted more than 50 people after a torrential downpour Tuesday stranded some residents in mud-coated rubble. The mudslides are part of a severe 1-2 punch dealt to Southern California, which suffered the deadly Thomas Fire just weeks ago, the largest wildfire in the state's history. The blaze left the area vulnerable to mudslides by burning away grass and shrubs that hold the soil in place, preventing water from sinking deeply into the ground.
Almost a month since their arrest in Myanmar, 2 Reuters journalists accused of breaching the country's Official Secrets Act appeared at a Yangon court on Wednesday, where prosecutors sought charges against them, under a law which carries a maximum prison sentence of 14 years. Wallone and Ja So-eu were arrested nearly a month ago after they were invited to meet police officers over dinner and were handed some documents. They'd been covering a crisis in the western state of Rakhine, which has seen more than 500,000 Rohingya Muslims flee a fierce military crackdown. Calls for the journalists' release have been growing. On Tuesday, former U.S. President Bill Clinton urged they be freed immediately, saying a free press is critical to a free society.
They're simply doing their jobs.
Reuters editor-in-chief Steve Adler said it was clearly not appropriate to prosecute journalists under an Official Secrets Act.
Well, so far we're very disappointed that it looks like charges are going to be brought against them. However, we have gotten a lot of global support, and we're going to continue to work on trying to influence them to see this as a matter of democratic rights and as a matter of press freedom in a democracy.
About 30 journalists were outside the court, most dressed in black, in protest of the reporter's arrest. Several wore the message, "Journalism is not a crime."
A reward for finding the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. Malaysia signed a deal Wednesday to pay a US seabed exploration firm up to $70 million if it finds the jet within 90 days of searching. The flight went down in the Indian Ocean en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing in March 2014. Its disappearance, along with all 239 people aboard, remains a mystery. Australia, China and Malaysia ended a fruitless search last January. Now Houston-based private company Ocean Infinity has already dispatched its vessel and will start searching in 1 week to take advantage of good weather. It carries 8 autonomous vehicles that will scan the seabed, so it can search 4 times faster than previous efforts. How much Ocean Infinity receives in pay will depend on how far it has to spread the search. Investigators believe someone may have deliberately diverted MH370 thousands of miles out over the Indian Ocean.
Hyundai now backing one of Uber's fiercest Asian rivals. The South Korean car maker said Thursday it's investing in Grab, a ride-hailing app that says it's the biggest player in Southeast Asia. The two didn't say how much money Hyundai will pour into the company, but Grab will get a helping hand, rolling out services using some of Hyundai's eco-friendly cars. The app's latest round of fundraising had other big names, Didi Chuxing in China and from Japan, SoftBank, the same investor that will snap up a big stake in Uber early this year. Hyundai's interest in Southeast Asia is a knock-on effect from political tension between China and South Korea last year, caused by Seoul's deployment of a U.S. anti-missile system. The diplomatic friction hurt South Korean firms that rely on the Chinese market. Hyundai also said earlier this month it will team up with Silicon Valley startup Aurora to work on self-driving cars, a shift away from its usual habit of making new tech by itself.
That was more of a direct assault on what is the First Amendment of our Constitution. Now I think it's more of a guerrilla war that's going on. They're trying to, it's sort of like chaos by any means. You begin by delegitimizing the free press, and by doing that you draw the truth into question. And as soon as you start saying, well, we have our own opinion of what the truth is, then you can get into some very, very scary territory that is not inclusive, that does not take into the rights of everybody, that is actually trying to form a more closed and closed-off union as opposed to the more perfect union that the preamble of our Constitution sets out to do. You are entitled to your own opinion. Have those till the cows come home, but you are not entitled to your own facts. And there are facts that are empirical, that are provable, that are confirmable, and you can't deny that. But if you deny that, you know what? You're sowing the wind, and you're going to reap the whirlwind.
The New Year Day.
This Japanese astronaut said he had serious news on Monday. Norishige Kanai took to Twitter to announce that he'd grown 9 centimeters while he was in space, just 3 weeks into a mission at the International Space Station. He said he was worried he might not fit into his spacecraft seat for the journey back to Earth. But by Wednesday, his claim was looking like a rather tall story. After a flurry of media attention, the astronaut returning to his Twitter feed to apologize for spreading what he called terrible fake news.
Are you ready?
Following questions raised by his captain, a remeasurement showed that he'd only grown 2 centimeters from his regular Earthbound height. Most humans in space do actually grow during protracted space missions because